I never thought I'd have to defend something I worked so hard for. But there I was, standing in my own kitchen, gripping my phone as my brother and parents flooded my messages with demands and guilt trips. I'm 33, single, and enjoying my peace. My younger brother, Adam, is 30, married, and has 4 kids, with a 5th on the way. He's always been the family's golden boy, the one who could do no wrong. Me, I was the one expected to be responsible, the one told to sacrifice for the family. That phrase had haunted me since childhood. And now, my family had a new idea of what my next sacrifice should be: my house. Let's go back a bit. A few years ago, I lost everything. The pandemic wiped out my job, my savings, and eventually my apartment. I lived out of my truck for nearly 2 years, struggling to get back on my feet. During that time, did my family help me? No. Adam and his wife, Lisa, mocked me. My parents turned their backs on me. I was called a failure and a loser, while Adam continued living rent-free in our parents' home with his ever-growing family. But I pulled myself up. I found work, saved every cent, and finally bought a modest 3-bedroom house. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Then I made the mistake of posting about it on social media. A few weeks later, my parents, Adam and Lisa, showed up uninvited, acting as if they owned the place. Lisa walked around like she was touring a property she'd already claimed, rubbing her pregnant belly and making loud comments about how perfect the house was for a real family. Adam clapped me on the back. Man, this place is nice, way better than mom and dad's, and way closer to my job too. I didn't like where this was going. Lisa shot me a sugary smile. So much space, and it's just you here. I shrugged. Yeah, I worked hard for it. Adam sighed dramatically, shaking his head. See, that's the thing. You don't need this much space. A sinking feeling settled in my gut. Lisa's eyes sparkled. We were talking, and we think it makes so much more sense for us to move in. You have that camper in the back, right? You can live in that. I stared at them. You have to be joking. Adam's face was serious. Dude, think about it. We're packed like sardines at mom and dad's. The kids need space. This house is perfect for a family. Lisa folded her arms. And you're just one person. It's kinda selfish, don't you think? I laughed, shaking my head. Let me get this straight. You want me to move into a camper in my own backyard while you and your kids take over my house? Adam nodded, like it was the most logical thing in the world. Exactly. It's a win-win. And you'd pay rent? I asked, already knowing the answer. Adam waved a hand dismissively. Dude, I have a family to support. Lisa sighed dramatically. We're family. Families help each other. I crossed my arms. Funny, you didn't help me when I was struggling. Adam's expression darkened. That was different. No, I snapped. It wasn't. Now get out. Lisa gasped like I'd just slapped her. How dare you speak to us like that? I'm pregnant. You're gonna put a pregnant woman out in the cold? I pointed at the door. I'm putting 2 entitled idiots out of my house. My parents had been quiet up until now, but my mom finally spoke, her voice dripping with condescension. Son, we talked about this. I raised an eyebrow. No, you talked about it. I never agreed to anything. My dad crossed his arms. You don't even need this house. I clenched my jaw. I do need my house. And this is the last time I'll say it. Get out. Adam stepped closer, lowering his voice. Don't be selfish. You're alone. We have a family to think about. I stepped even closer, meeting his glare. And whose fault is that? I didn't tell you to have 5 kids while still living with mom and dad. His jaw clenched. Lisa sniffled dramatically. My mom sighed heavily. We just want what's best for the family. I took a deep breath. Then you let them move in with you. My dad scoffed. Don't be ridiculous. I crossed my arms. Exactly. Adam's face twisted in frustration. You're really not going to do this for us? Not in a million years. Silence stretched between us. Then, without another word, Adam stormed out. Lisa followed, muttering curses under her breath. My parents left last, my mom shaking her head like I'd disappointed her. As soon as they were gone, I locked the door and exhaled. It was over. Or so, I thought. A few days later, I came home to find a moving truck in my driveway. I pulled into my driveway and hit the brakes so hard my truck jerked forward. A damn moving truck. Parked right in front of my house. Next to it, Adam's minivan. My heart started pounding. I barely had time to register the sight before I saw them. Adam, Lisa, and their 4 kids running around like they had already moved in. Lisa stood on the porch, directing traffic like a general overseeing her troops. I jumped out of my truck, slamming the door. What the hell is this? Adam turned, grinning like he had just won the lottery. Oh, hey, man. We figured we'd get a head start. A head start on what? Lisa placed a hand on her hip. On moving in, obviously. I blinked. Excuse me? Adam sighed, like I was the one being unreasonable. Come on, don't be difficult. We all know this is what's best. Lisa nodded. Your mother already said it was okay. I clenched my jaw. My mother doesn't own this house. I do. Adam waved a dismissive hand. Yeah, but she made it clear she wants us to have it. I stormed past them and grabbed the doorknob only to find that it wouldn't turn. I stopped cold. No way. I pulled again, harder this time. The door didn't budge. The locks had been changed. I turned slowly to face them, my voice dangerously low. Did you seriously change the locks on my house? Lisa smirked. Well, we needed access. I could feel my blood pressure skyrocketing. You broke into my house? Adam had the nerve to look offended. It's not breaking in if we're moving in. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling with rage. I'm giving you one chance to get your crap and leave. Right now. Lisa folded her arms. You're so dramatic. We've already started unpacking. I pulled out my phone. Fine. You don't want to leave? I'll have the cops make you. Lisa's smug expression flickered. Oh, come on. Are you really going to do that to family? Adam stepped forward. Think about this, man. Do you really want to get the police involved? I tapped the screen and brought the phone to my ear. Watch me. Lisa's face twisted with fury. She stormed up to me, jabbing a finger at my chest. You are so selfish. You're seriously going to call the cops on a pregnant woman? I met her glare. I absolutely am. Lisa huffed, crossing her arms. You're going to regret this. Adam shook his head. Man, you're making this way harder than it needs to be. I'm making this hard? I laughed bitterly. You broke into my house and are trying to steal it. Lisa rolled her eyes. It's not stealing if we're family. Oh, so if I stole your car, would that be fine because we share DNA? She scowled. That's not the same thing. Yes, it is. Before she could respond, I saw flashing lights down the street. Good. 2 police cars pulled up, and 2 officers stepped out. I let out a slow breath, my heart hammering. One officer approached me while the other spoke to Adam and Lisa. What's going on here? I gestured at the moving truck. My brother and his wife broke into my house, changed my locks, and started moving their stuff in without my permission. The officer's brows shot up. Do they have a lease? Any proof that they're supposed to be here? I scoffed. No, because I never agreed to let them move in. Adam stepped forward, his hands raised like he was the victim. Officer, this is all just a big misunderstanding. Lisa nodded eagerly. Yeah, his mom said we could move in. The officer frowned. Does she own the house? Adam hesitated. Well, no, but then her permission means nothing. The officer cut in. If the homeowner, he motioned to me, didn't approve this, then you're trespassing. Lisa's face twisted in anger. But I'm pregnant. The officer didn't even flinch. And? Lisa gasped like he'd just committed a crime against humanity. You're really gonna kick out a pregnant woman? The officer sighed, clearly unimpressed. MAAM. Pregnancy doesn't give you the right to break into someone's house. Adam was getting desperate. Look, we're family. This doesn't have to get ugly. We can work something out. I folded my arms. Yeah, you can pack your stuff and leave. That's the only deal on the table. Lisa turned to the officer. Can't you do something? This is so unfair. The officer gave her a flat look. The only thing I'm doing is making sure you leave before you get arrested. Adam paled. Wait, arrested? The officer nodded. You changed the locks. That's breaking and entering. I could charge you right now. Lisa's confidence shattered. You wouldn't. The officer raised an eyebrow. Try me. There was a long, tense silence. Then Adam exhaled sharply and turned to Lisa. Let's go. Lisa looked like she wanted to argue, but Adam had finally realized they weren't winning this one. They sulked back to the moving truck and started shoving their boxes back inside. Their kids, blissfully unaware of their parents' stupidity, kept playing on my lawn. As Adam loaded the last box, he turned to me, his face filled with barely contained rage. You happy now? I smirked. Ecstatic. Lisa glared at me. You're gonna regret this. I grinned. Doubt it. The officers waited until they were fully packed up before motioning for them to leave. As the truck and minivan rolled out of my driveway, I felt a weight lift off my chest, but I knew my family. They weren't done yet. They would never give up that easily, and I was right, because 3 days later, my parents showed up on my doorstep with a new plan. 3 days. That's how long it took for my parents to come knocking. I wasn't surprised. If anything, I was surprised they waited that long. I heard the doorbell first. Then the pounding started. I sighed, setting my coffee down. I already knew who it was. When I opened the door, I was greeted by my mother's signature disapproving glare. My father stood beside her, arms crossed, looking just as irritated. Adam was there too, but this time, Lisa was nowhere in sight. "Son, we need to talk," my mother said, pushing past me into the house. My father and Adam followed before I could stop them. I shut the door, forcing a neutral expression. "I'm guessing this isn't a social visit." My mother ignored the sarcasm. "You've made things very difficult for this family." I leaned against the wall. "By not letting my brother steal my house?" My father sighed like I was being unreasonable. "We raised you to care about family, not to be so selfish." Adam chimed in, his voice tight with barely restrained anger. "You called the cops on us. You broke into my house," I shot back. "What did you expect me to do? Hand you the keys and say welcome home?" My mother let out a dramatic sigh. "Enough. We're past that now. The point is, you need to fix this." I narrowed my eyes. "Fix what?" She lifted her chin. "We've decided that you will let Adam and his family move in." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. "You've decided?" "Yes," my father said, stepping forward like he was about to lay down the law. "This house is too big for one person. Adam has a family. They need it more than you do." My fingers curled into fists. "Unbelievable." Adam smirked, like he thought this was already won. "We're willing to be reasonable about this. You can still live here, in my own camper." I cut in, my voice laced with venom. "Well, yeah," I scoffed. "Let me get this straight. You broke into my house, changed the locks, got kicked out by the police, and now you're back to demand. I let you stay? And you think that's reasonable?" Adam shifted uncomfortably. "Look, man, Mom and Dad are right. You don't need all this space." My mother stepped forward, her voice softening into that manipulative, saccharine tone she always used when she wanted something. "We understand that you worked hard for this, sweetheart. But think about the kids. They need stability. You have so much, and Adam's just trying to do what's best for his family." I almost laughed. What's best for his family? And what about me? When I was struggling, where was this concern? Where was this family loyalty when I was living out of my truck? My father rolled his eyes. That was different. I shook my head, anger bubbling up inside me. It always is, isn't it? When Adam needs something, its family comes first. But when I need help, suddenly I'm on my own. Adam's smirk was gone now. "So what? You're just gonna let my kids suffer? You mean your kids? The ones you chose to have while still living with Mom and Dad?" My mother sucked in a sharp breath. That was unnecessary. "No," I said firmly. "What's unnecessary is you all trying to bully me into giving up my house. This conversation is over. Get out." My mother's expression hardened. "No, it's not over. You will do this for Adam, or you'll regret it." I crossed my arms. "Are you threatening me?" She pursed her lips. "You will regret shutting out your family. We won't forget this." "Good," I said coldly. "Because neither will I." Adam glared at me, his face red with frustration. "You don't deserve this house." I chuckled. "And you do?" He stepped closer, his jaw clenched. "You've always been selfish." "No, I've always refused to be your doormat." My father rubbed his temples, clearly losing patience. "Son, just be reasonable." "I am being reasonable," I snapped. "Reasonable would have been me pressing charges when you broke in." Adam flinched. My mother gasped. "You wouldn't." I leaned in, lowering my voice. "Try me." The silence was deafening. Then my father grabbed my mother's arm, pulling her toward the door. "We're leaving." Adam hesitated, like he wanted to say more. But in the end, he followed them out. I didn't move until I heard their car pull away. Then I locked the door and let out a long breath. It was finally over. Or so I thought. Because the next morning I woke up to find my parents had gone to social media. They were painting me as the villain. I woke up to my phone, buzzing nonstop. At first I thought it was just spam or a group chat blowing up. But when I finally checked, my stomach twisted. My parents had gone public. They had taken to social media, twisting the entire situation to make me look like the villain. My mother had written a long, dramatic post about how her selfish son had abandoned his family in their time of need, refusing to help his struggling brother and innocent little nieces and nephews. She painted a picture of me as some heartless, greedy monster hoarding a house that should have rightfully gone to Adam. There were phrases like, "After everything we've done for him, and how could he turn his back on his own blood?" And the cherry on top, Lisa had chimed in, playing the victim. She wrote her own post, dramatically talking about how her poor children had to sleep in a cramped house because their cruel uncle refused to show them kindness. She went on about how stressful it was to be a pregnant mother with no place of her own, how families should support each other, and how she had never felt so betrayed in her life. I scrolled through the comments, feeling my blood pressure rise. A few flying monkeys family members who had always taken my parents' side were eating it up. They were posting comments like, "I can't believe he's being so selfish. That house is way too big for one person. He should be ashamed. What happened to family first? Poor Lisa. She deserves so much better." I clenched my jaw, but then something surprising happened. For every relative blindly siding with my parents, there were twice as many people calling them out. "Wait, didn't you all ignore him when he was struggling? He worked for that house. Why should he just hand it over? Adam is a grown man. Why is he still mooching off everyone? This doesn't sound like the full story." My parents and Lisa hadn't expected pushback. I could tell by how quickly my mother started responding, trying to backpedal. She doubled down, calling me ungrateful and cold-hearted. Lisa started crying in the comments, saying she just wanted a safe home for her kids. That's when I decided I wasn't going to let them control the narrative. I made my own post. Since my family has decided to blast me publicly, let's set the record straight. A few years ago, I lost my job and was forced to live out of my truck. My family refused to help me. They called me a loser, a failure. Adam and Lisa mocked me for being homeless. My parents wouldn't even let me park in their driveway. I fought my way back, saved every cent, and bought a home. Now that I have something of my own, suddenly I'm expected to give it up just because my brother keeps having kids he can't afford. They broke into my house. They changed my locks. They tried to force me out. I called the cops. Now, because they didn't get their way, they're trying to paint me as the bad guy. I won't apologize for standing up for myself. I won't let them guilt me into giving away my home. Family doesn't mean unconditional servitude. If you think otherwise, feel free to give your house to Adam. It spread like wildfire. Family members who had been on the fence now saw the full picture. The ones who had been blindly supporting my parents started backtracking. Aunts and uncles I barely spoke to messaged me privately, saying they had no idea what had really happened. Then, the ultimate bombshell, my grandparents chimed in. They weren't online much, but someone must have shown them the posts because my grandmother commented, "I'm ashamed of how my daughter and son-in-law have treated their own child. You let Adam take advantage of you, and now you expect his brother to do the same. We raised you better than this. We support you, Alex." That was it, the nail in the coffin. If there was one thing my parents hated, it was losing face in front of the extended family. My mother immediately deleted her post. Lisa locked down her profile. Adam stopped responding, but it wasn't over yet, because 2 days later, my parents showed up at my door. I opened it just a crack, keeping the chain lock in place. "What do you want?" My mother's face was red with anger. "How dare you embarrass us like that?" I sighed. "You embarrassed yourselves." My father stepped forward, his tone low and threatening. "Take it down." I leaned against the doorframe. "No." My mother's voice wobbled. "We are your parents. You owe us respect." I raised an eyebrow. "Like the respect you showed me when I was homeless? Or the respect you showed when you tried to steal my house?" Adam, standing behind them, finally spoke. "You don't get it, do you? You're alone. You'll always be alone. We're family, whether you like it or not. One day, you'll need us." I let out a slow breath, then smiled. "You're right about one thing," he smirked, thinking I was about to give in. I took off the chain lock, stepped outside, and looked him dead in the eye. I am alone, and I'd rather be alone than surrounded by people who only see me as a resource. Adam's smirk vanished. My mother opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "We're done here." And then I closed the door in their faces. For the first time in my life, I felt free. I knew they wouldn't stop trying to weasel their way back in. But now I had set boundaries. They couldn't control me anymore. I blocked my parents, Adam, and Lisa on everything. I stopped responding to flying monkeys. I kept my house mine, and it felt damn good. But I wasn't naive. I knew they'd try one more thing before they finally gave up. And I was right. Because a week later, Adam tried to sue me. A week of silence. That's how long it took before Adam made his next move. Just when I thought they'd finally given up, I got served. I came home from work one evening and found an envelope taped to my door. At first, I thought it was just another passive-aggressive note from Lisa. But when I opened it, my jaw dropped. It was a lawsuit. Adam was suing me for wrongful eviction and emotional distress. I read through the documents 3 times, trying to make sense of the absolute nonsense in front of me. According to Adam, he was a legal tenant in my house, despite never having a lease, never paying rent, and, oh yeah, breaking into my home and changing my locks. He claimed that I had unfairly thrown him and his pregnant wife out onto the street, causing their family immense hardship and suffering. Lisa had even included a heart-wrenching letter about how the stress of being forcibly removed had put strain on her pregnancy, how their kids had cried themselves to sleep, and how I had ripped a stable home away from an innocent family. I had never seen something so ridiculous in my life. I sat down, exhaling sharply. They're really doing this. Fine. They wanted war. They were about to get one. The next morning, I called a lawyer. I explained the entire situation to her, from the break-in to the police getting involved, and she actually laughed. "This is one of the dumbest cases I've ever heard," she said. That was comforting. She assured me that Adam didn't have a legal leg to stand on. He had never been a tenant. He had no lease. The cops had already classified him as a trespasser when they removed him. "This case won't even make it past the first hearing," she said. "We'll file a motion to dismiss, and this'll be over before it starts." Still, the audacity of it all made my blood boil. Adam had never paid a single bill in his life. He had always mooched off someone, our parents, his friends, his in-laws. And now that I had something he couldn't leech off, he thought he could force me to give it to him. Not a chance. The day of the first hearing came. Adam and Lisa actually showed up to court, dressed like they were about to win the jackpot. Lisa was milking her pregnancy for all it was worth, holding her belly and sighing dramatically every few minutes. I barely acknowledged them. My lawyer handled everything. She presented the police report, showed the messages from my parents admitting they decided I should give Adam the house, brought up the recording I had of Adam saying to my face that I didn't deserve the house. It took the judge less than 10 minutes to throw the whole case out. Adam looked shocked. Lisa gasped like someone had slapped her. The judge wasn't done yet, though. He turned to Adam and scolded him for wasting the court's time. "You cannot just move into someone's house and claim it as your own," he said, rubbing his temples like this was giving him a migraine. Then he turned to me. "Would you like to countersue for damages?" The room went dead silent. Adam's face drained of color. Lisa clutched his arm like that could somehow save them. I thought about it. I could. I really could. They had broken my locks, trespassed, and caused me months of stress and harassment. I had every right to take them to court for legal fees, damages, and emotional distress. But then I looked at Adam. He was already falling apart. His entire plan had blown up in his face. He knew if I sued him, he'd have no way out. I leaned forward, staring him down. "No," I said finally. "I don't need to." Adam exhaled in relief. Then I smirked. I win either way. Adam flinched. Lisa looked like she wanted to throw something at me. The judge dismissed the case, and that was it. I walked out of that courtroom a free man. Adam and Lisa walked out defeated, humiliated, and still homeless. That was the final nail in the coffin. The lawsuit had backfired so badly that even my parents couldn't defend it. The moment word spread that Adam had tried to sue me for a house he never owned, whatever support he had left in the family vanished. Even the flying monkeys stopped backing him. My parents went silent after that. They didn't call, didn't message, didn't try to guilt trip me anymore. Adam stopped posting about me online. Lisa deleted all her dramatic posts. They had lost. For good. Months passed. For the first time in years, I had peace. I focused on my work, built my savings back up, and finally started enjoying my house without fear of it being stolen. And Adam, still living with my parents, still trapped in that cramped house with 4 kids, a newborn, and Lisa complaining 24/7. The last I heard, even my parents were getting sick of him. Guess it turns out when you enable someone their whole life, they never actually grow up. Who would have thought? Months passed. For the first time in my life, I had peace. No calls from my parents trying to manipulate me. No messages from Adam demanding what was rightfully his. No passive-aggressive posts from Lisa. Silence. And it was beautiful. I settled into my house, finally decorating it the way I wanted. I upgraded my furniture, planted a garden in the backyard, and even started hosting small gatherings with friends. It felt good to enjoy something I had worked so hard for. But just when I thought I'd seen the last of my family drama, I got an unexpected message from my aunt. "You won't believe this. Your parents are trying to sell their house." I raised an eyebrow. Sell their house? That was news to me. I called her immediately. Wait, what? When did this happen? Apparently, it's been in the works for a while. They're drowning financially, she said. They were counting on Adam to move in with you so they could downsize. But, well, you know how that turned out. I laughed. Loudly. So let me guess, Adam still refuses to move out? Oh, it's worse than that, she said, barely containing her amusement. He's demanding they buy a bigger house so he and Lisa have more space. I nearly dropped my phone. You're joking. Nope. He threw a fit when they suggested he and Lisa get their own place. He says it's their job to take care of him. I let out a long, slow whistle. So now they get to deal with what they created. Exactly, she said. Your mom is miserable. She doesn't get any peace with all those kids running around. And Lisa constantly complains about how cramped everything is. And now that they can't force you to take them in, they're stuck. I smirked. Poetic justice. Do they still blame me? I asked. Debbie sighed. Oh, of course. Your mom tells everyone you abandoned them in their time of need. Right, I said, shaking my head. Because not letting them steal my house is abandonment, she chuckled. I don't think even she believes it anymore. She's just too stubborn to admit she was wrong. I thought about it for a moment. This was it. The final consequence of their own entitlement. My parents had let Adam walk all over them his whole life. And now, when they needed to put their foot down, they couldn't. He was their problem now. And for the first time in my life, it wasn't mine. A few more months went by. Christmas was approaching, and I decided to host a holiday party for the family members who actually supported me. The guest list? Anyone except my parents, Adam and Lisa. I invited my aunts, uncles, cousins, people who had reached out and supported me when the whole mess happened. People who actually treated me like family, not like an ATM. The night of the party, my house was full. Laughter, music, warmth. I looked around and realized this was what family was supposed to feel like. Then, just as we were finishing dinner, there was a knock at the door. I already knew who it was before I even checked. I opened it to find my mother standing there, bundled up in a thick coat, her expression unreadable. I didn't say anything. I just waited. May I come in? She asked softly. I glanced behind me at the party, then back at her. Why? She sighed. I wanted to talk. I leaned against the doorframe. Talk about what? How I ruined Adam's life. How I abandoned the family. She flinched but didn't deny it. I shook my head. I don't have anything left to say, Mom. Her eyes filled with tears. I miss you. That one hit differently. For a split second, I felt a tug of something nostalgia, longing, the faintest hope that maybe she finally saw what she had done. But then I thought about everything. The years of favoritism. The way they turned their backs on me when I needed them. The way they tried to steal my house. I sighed. I miss the idea of you too. Her face crumpled. You're really not going to forgive me? I tilted my head. Forgiveness isn't the problem. Trust is. And I don't trust you. She wiped her eyes. We just wanted what was best for the family. I nodded slowly. And so did I. That's why I finally chose to put myself first. Silence stretched between us. Finally, she nodded. I see. I didn't say anything else. She turned, stepping off the porch, and for the first time in my life, I felt no guilt watching her walk away. I closed the door, took a deep breath, and turned back to my party. The past was finally behind me, and for the first time, my future was mine. A year passed. Adam? Still living with my parents, still refusing to move out. From what I heard, Lisa was miserable. My mother was regretting all her life choices, and my father had given up trying to control any of it. They had made their bed, and now they had to lie in it. Me? I was thriving. I had a new girlfriend, a stable job, and a house that was still mine. I traveled, made new friends, and finally started living life on my terms. No more guilt. No more manipulation. No more doing it for Adam. And I have never been happier. Story 2. I severed my ties with my family after years of being the letdown. My parents are urging me to return home, and my addicted sister is in need of me right now. My own parents humiliated me in front of everyone at my sister's graduation celebration 3 years ago, leaving me feeling completely ashamed. This celebration, surrounded by our close friends and family, was intended to be entirely about my elder sister, Amelia. After graduating from college, she'd landed a fantastic job that she couldn't wait to begin. I anticipated hearing remarks that would just highlight her achievements when my parents got up to speak in her honor. She had put a lot of effort into getting to this point, after all, and she was deserving of every accolade. One of the biggest gifts in their lives was my sister, whom they mentioned in their address that evening. By that time, I wasn't very shocked. I was old enough to understand that Amelia was more important to my parents than I was. My parents had always compared me to her, the more successful daughter, on a daily basis. However, after having Amelia, my parents started making jokes about how they should have stopped having children because, in their opinion, second-borns are typically worthless anyhow, and how they could have wasted more time and effort on Amelia rather than wasting it on me if she had been their only child. As I sat there, I was astounded to hear people speak such nasty things in such an open and thoughtless manner. I glanced around the room in the hopes that someone, anybody, would take note of how hurtful what they had said was, but all I saw were my family members' faces, smiling as though this hurtful analogy were just lighthearted banter. My parents had always made me feel inferior and worthless, but this was the first time they had done it so openly, so I had no choice but to accept the truth that, in their view, I was just not as good as their beloved daughter, Amelia. This was not an isolated incident or a case of poor decision-making. It was an affirmation of what I had always sensed, that they will always treasure my elder sister as their daughter. In contrast, I was viewed as a far-off afterthought. Growing up as the second-born, I was used to the implicit favoritism that pervaded our home. It was continuously infiltrating via their words, deeds, and routines. My parents would frequently fail to wish me a happy birthday, and on many occasions, they were conveniently away on business when my birthday arrived, leaving me essentially alone. But they wouldn't miss a second when it came to Amelia. Every year, without fail, both of my parents would be there to throw a lavish celebration and make sure she felt honored. Observing how they lavished her with love on her special day taught me early on to control my expectations and come to terms with the fact that my birthday just wasn't as important to them, because I was always a gregarious kid. My parents used to frequently tell me that I was problematic or bothersome just because of who I was. I was called tough because I didn't match the quiet, subdued stereotype, and reprimanded for something as trivial as being overly chatty or loudly expressing my interest. It appears that they like it better. Amelia, on the other hand, was constantly complimented on her quiet demeanor and reclusive behaviors. She was regarded by our family as the perfect daughter, mature and well-behaved. As a result, throughout the years, she was the one they showed and paraded about in front of everyone, while I was the one they often critiqued. For a while, I made an effort to project the image that my parents seemed to desire. I worked hard in the hopes that they would someday view me differently if I behaved differently, accomplished more, or went down the route they outlined. As I got older, though, I realized that I couldn't just make myself become Amelia. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't become her, since we were two distinct individuals. At some point, I simply gave up and tried to get used to their unwavering praise for her. The way they would boast about her achievements to anybody who would listen, while dismissing all I had ever done. But at least all those times, as painful as they were, had remained inside the family. I was surprised by how nonchalantly my parents seemed to embarrass me during their speech at Amelia's graduation, because I had never been embarrassed in front of others before. For the first time, they showed their lack of respect for me to the whole extended family. The fact that no one in my whole family voiced their opinion or informed my parents that this was improper astounded me even more. Nobody made those jokes at my expense, not even to the extent of showing me sympathy for my parents. With pride in their voices that I had never seen directed at me, my parents kept praising Amelia. They then proudly declared that they had purchased a brand new automobile for her as a graduation present, something she had always desired. Everyone in the room cheered, applauded, and laughed as Amelia gave my parents a heartfelt hug, filled with thanks and delight. They all appeared to be really content. I felt alienated from my own family at that point. The peculiar thing is that I've never been envious of Amelia. We had always gotten along well enough, and I firmly think she deserved all the excellent things that happened to her, but I was broken by that speech. The answer to the question of whether I approached my parents following that degrading speech is that I did. I had silently put up with their partiality, their indifference, and their cruel comments for years. I took it all in, telling myself that perhaps if I simply remained silent, if I just tried to be tough and not complain, then things could improve. However, I eventually lost it that night after the speech and after being made the target of their joke in front of everyone. I had had enough of suppressing everything. I'm sick of acting as though their remarks no longer hurt me. I thus made the decision that I could no longer remain silent. In the hopes that my parents would see how much their behavior had impacted me, I plucked up the confidence to speak up. I wanted them to comprehend. In order to at least demonstrate that they were interested enough to listen to me, I wanted them to acknowledge the shame I was feeling at the time, as well as the hurt they had caused over the years. I reasoned that if I told them how I felt, they may change their minds, or at the very least feel bad about making me feel so unimportant. However, I encountered a chilly, contemptuous reaction when I eventually challenged them. They hardly listened to what I had to say. They accused me of overreacting rather than showing sympathy or offering an apology, as though the years of being disregarded and denigrated could be dismissed with such ease. They pretended that I had no right to be angry with them and that my sentiments were unimportant. My father even went so far as to say that he had nothing to be proud of in me and that I shouldn't blame them if they were unhappy with me. I still recall how casually he spoke it, like if my existence didn't concern him. However, my mother told me to stop overreacting and said that I was being too needy by being upset about something so little. It seemed like my parents were implying that I hadn't even merited the bare respect of being their kid because I hadn't done enough, that I wasn't worthy of their love or pride because I wasn't Amelia. The issue even reached my sister, who clearly insisted that I was being too hard on my parents and took their side. She assured me that their graduation speech was only a harmless joke and that I shouldn't be concerned about it. She even said something that deeply wounded me and will always stick in my memory. Amelia informed me that I may be able to make them proud if I had simply put in the same amount of study time and effort as she had. More than anything else, those words hurt. It was upsetting to be implied that I hadn't done enough to gain their regard. She made it seem so easy, as though my years of hard work had gone unnoticed by her, as though my hardships and my own efforts to find my position were nothing. I had assumed that, as my elder sister, she would somehow defend me, but she didn't. It seemed like a betrayal to hear that from her. In hindsight, that discussion altered everything. After that, I came to the realization that I was done with my family, done attempting to win their acceptance, done justifying myself, and done hoping for unattainable love or affirmation. I focused all of my attention on creating something for myself after that day. I gave my all to my education, concentrating on the things that I could influence and that would help me have a brighter future. All of that effort paid off 2 years later. I achieved a personal achievement when I was admitted on a full scholarship to my ideal institution. It was an accomplishment that was all mine, the product of my diligence, commitment, and unwillingness to let the neglect of my family to define who I was. For the first time, I felt like I had accomplished something that was really mine, and I had earned that accomplishment. When I broke the news to my parents, they were in complete shock, as though they had never anticipated my decision to attend college at all, in addition to receiving a scholarship. As if she couldn't believe I could truly do something on my own, my sister looked at my admission letter twice. They had all obviously underestimated me, and I got a little gratification from seeing their shocked expressions. But then my mother made me feel bad by saying that it was a good thing. They had no college funds put aside for me anyhow. So this resolved all of their issues, and I now have a full scholarship. When she said that, I simply shook my head. My sister's schooling was easily funded by my parents, but they didn't think to save anything for me. When my move-out date came around, I recently packed up and moved out of my house to live in my college residence hall. I consciously decided to stop communicating with my parents and sister, Amelia, after that day. I felt no need to give them an explanation of why. After all, they had repeatedly demonstrated that they didn't care about my opinions, feelings, or efforts. Why should I waste my energy attempting to explain something to them that they had shown they couldn't even recognize? The years of neglect and pain they had caused me could not be undone by an apology, and I realized it was pointless to try to argue with them because they hadn't even provided one. My family kept in touch with me in the next weeks and months, sending me texts and emails. I was first tempted to open them in the remote hope that perhaps they had changed their minds and made an effort to put things right. However, every communication served as a sour reminder of their identity. Their emails were full of efforts to gaslight me into thinking I was the one being unreasonable, rather than accepting responsibility for the years of emotional suffering they had inflicted. They portrayed my choice to sever relations as immature and hasty, claiming I had overreacted. Their underlying tone consistently returned to the notion that I was the one severing the family and that I was terrible for cutting them off. I have thus never bothered to respond to any of them. So far, my college experience has been fantastic. I've been able to devote all of my attention to my education, hobbies, and above all, forming connections with others who accept and cherish me for who I am. In order to save money for the future, I have started working part-time at a nearby diner. Meeting new individuals and learning about their lives at the diner is pleasant. I've thrown myself into my academics, my social life, and everything my new surroundings have to offer after severing my ties with my family, making meaningful experiences a part of my days. In all honesty, I haven't even thought about them or wondered how they're doing. I was shocked to learn that my parents had ceased writing to me a long time ago when I unexpectedly received an email from them yesterday. I had never even responded to any of their prior letters. My parents had some serious news to share with me, so they pushed me to get in touch with them right away via this email. My chest constricted, in spite of everything, even the years of rejection and pain. I kept having the uneasy sensation that something horrible had occurred. All I could think of was the potential that someone in the family had been very ill, or, worse, had died, and my heart began to race. I was determined to avoid them, but the worry got to me. I grabbed the phone, unblocked them, and gave them a call back right away. As I prepared myself for whatever news they were going to bring, my heart was pounding. I was informed by my parents that they wanted to tell me about my elder sister, Amelia, who was experiencing a serious personal issue. They have apparently learned that she has been struggling with drug addiction, which has had a terrible impact on her life. They claim that her addiction has gotten so bad that she has lost her job, spent all of her savings, and is now left with no options or resources. I was very taken aback by this news because I had no idea that my sister was experiencing anything similar. In my perspective, Amelia had always been the reliable, successful sister who had their life together. However, the same sister was now addicted to drugs. I found it difficult to accept that Amelia's addiction was so outrageous in my parents' view that it destroyed their perception of her. I could feel the shock, the despair, and above all, the enormous fear of what would happen to their reputation if anybody else ever found out. Along with sharing all of this, they said they hoped I might provide them with some answers. They said it was shocking that Amelia, of all people, had been involved in something as harmful as drug abuse, considering how grounded and responsible she had always appeared to them. Then, with a suspicious tone in his voice, my father questioned, "Back then, you didn't expose her to drugs, did you?" The implication caught me completely off guard. It was not only ridiculous, but also quite offensive that they could believe I was responsible for Amelia's difficulties, much less something as severe as exposing her to drugs. How could I offer drugs to my elder sister when I didn't even use them myself? And because of the way Amelia and the rest of my family had treated me, I hadn't spoken to them in years. I had been apart from their destructive lifestyles, concentrating on creating my own path. Now, however, they were ready to find someone else to blame, despite their idealized picture of Amelia losing it. And, as usual, it seems that I was the easiest person to blame. I asked them to speak with Amelia before making any assumptions, and told them how absurd it was for them to even suspect me. During our talk, I saw that my parents were more preoccupied with the embarrassment they thought Amelia's disclosure would cause the family. My mother appeared preoccupied with her discomfort about my sister's hidden habit, rather than expressing concern for her. "People would speak if they ever found out," she said, describing how surprising it was to see the side of her ideal daughter. Then, because she and my dad were overburdened and unprepared to deal with the situation with my sister, my mom started begging me to return home so I could assist them in caring for Amelia. What exactly do we do, after all? She makes me feel so humiliated. Perhaps you might speak with her on our behalf. After years of not communicating with me, my mother asked me, as like it were a legitimate request. I was honest with them and informed them that I was unable to assist Amelia. She requires expert assistance. Family intervention at home is not enough to address my sister's addiction, which is a significant and complicated issue. I emphasize that the finest and most humane thing they could do would be to send her to a treatment facility where skilled specialists could help her recover if they genuinely cared about her health and wanted to help her overcome her addiction. However, my father pushed down the idea of sending her to rehab right away, almost trembling at the thought of her admittance to a treatment facility, damaging their family's reputation. According to him, taking her there would only damage their reputation in the eyes of others. The idea of people becoming aware that their only successful daughter had a major issue, like drug addiction, was too much for him to handle. My father chastised me for bringing up this possibility, as though publicly admitting her addiction was somehow more embarrassing. He emphasized that I had to return home and that we all had to cooperate in order to care for Amelia, maintaining round-the-clock surveillance to prevent her from relapsing, as if this would resolve the problem on its own. He talked endlessly about how all they wanted was for my sister to get healthy and return to her normal life as quickly as possible. They believed that things would return to normal as long as no one else knew. They wanted me to participate in a charade, to pretend that nothing was wrong while concealing her difficulties from the public. I was filled with incredulity and rage as I listened. Why did my parents care so much about their image and what other people thought of them? My sister was obviously dealing with a severe issue, and my parents had the opportunity to prove that they could put their daughter's needs ahead of appearances and genuinely change her life, but they were unable to do so. Evidently, these individuals had not changed at all, and now they were attempting to reintegrate me, expecting me to maintain this family facade by assisting them in caring for my sister, to whom they constantly made comparisons. I told them I needed time to consider the situation. After all, I can't just up and go, since I have to consider about my work and my studies. My parents argued that since they truly needed me, I could take at least 2 or 3 weeks off to assist them. I'm feeling torn about the whole affair right now. While a part of me wants to be selfish and let my parents raise their golden kid alone, another part of me wants to check in on Amelia and see if there is anything I can do to help. They still care more about maintaining their appearance than they do about getting to the core of the problem, so I don't know whether I can be much of a help either. If I decline to return home and care for my sister who is addicted to drugs, one update. All right, whoa. I had no idea this story would become so popular. It has taken me some time to read through the hundreds of comments that I have received. I want to make some clarifications. I'm not hostile toward my sister. Actually, I sincerely want to assist her and I genuinely care about her. But because I haven't spoken to my family in 3 years, I've enjoyed a sense of security and serenity that I hadn't before experienced. I'm terrified that getting back in touch with my sister will allow my parents to re-enter my life as well. For anyone who are curious in how my sister got into a drug addiction and whether she has been battling it for years, possibly even before my parents just learned about it, to be honest, I'm not certain. Amelia was unquestionably the golden kid who was hailed and maintained as the ideal daughter. In my opinion, there is frequently a great deal of pressure to uphold this sort of pedestal, which leaves little opportunity for weakness or failure. If Amelia thought that her worth was related only to her successes and how others saw her, any setback, no matter how slight, may have been devastating. I suppose that over time, she may have turned to drugs as a coping strategy to get away from the pressure of those expectations or the worry of disappointing our parents. The notion that my sister could have been silently battling all these time without informing me makes me feel more worse. I wish she had felt comfortable talking to me honestly sooner. Before things reached this stage, I would have wanted to be there for her, to help her work through it. It simply makes me feel powerless, like if I could have helped her with this significant aspect of her life that I was unaware of. In addition, my parents had high expectations for me and my sister from an early age because they are high achievers themselves. I need some time to consider everything, and I'll keep you updated if anything else comes up. Update 2. I made the decision to contact Amelia in spite of everything after much internal discussion and support from some of the comments I read. Since she is my sister, I thought it was crucial to speak with her directly, rather than relying on my parents' version of events to guide my actions. I sent her a text initially, just a basic message asking if she wanted to chat. After several hours, she finally responded and consented to a phone conversation. The voice on the other end of the telephone sounded like a ghost of the sister I knew when we eventually talked. Amelia's tone seemed heavier, and she was more reserved. She gradually revealed what she had been going through. Amelia said that she had been battling addiction for a few years. She had always been the ideal, accomplished daughter, so it began soon after she graduated and started working at her law firm. She also found it difficult to uphold that position at work, constantly going above and above to win over her supervisor in the hopes of receiving further praise or a promotion. However, gradually, she started to feel fatigued and burnout. Even still, Amelia believed that she had to live up to the standards that everyone had set for her. Therefore, she could never falter, slow down, or beg for assistance. A friend suggested recreational drug use to her as a way to relax when the stress got too much. Before she even noticed it, what started off as occasional use became into reliance. Amelia also disclosed that she felt stuck for a very long period. She couldn't disclose to her parents that she was struggling since she knew how they would respond. She felt alone because of their insistence on appearances and their refusal to accept anything that didn't fit their story. She maintained the facade, acting as though nothing was wrong. Even when she started to lose control, she was unable to conceal the truth until she lost her work, started abusing drugs, and spent all of her funds. She asked me if I was judging her as harshly as she was condemning me, and expressed how ashamed she was to even tell me this. It was devastating to hear her story. I realized for the first time that her parents' elevated status wasn't a perk, it was a jail. While I've been struggling with the sorrow of being neglected, she had been dealing with the oppressive weight of being their golden child. Both of us, in our separate ways, had been affected by our parents' partiality and their fixation with control. I told her that I wished she had confided to me about her feelings, since there was no way that I would have ever judged her. My only regret is that I wasn't there for her during all of this. I understood her better than she could. After then, Amelia really apologized to me for everything that had transpired between us. She apologized for consistently siding with our parents. She acknowledged that she had been so preoccupied with her own problems at the time that she had not been able to relate to my suffering. She expressed her guilt for not defending me during the speech at the graduation celebration, and expressed her sadness for her role in making me feel unimportant. I was momentarily at a loss for words. Part of me wanted to hang on to the fury I had held for so long, to remind her of how deeply her comments had hurt. The larger part of me, though, the one that had always cared for and admired my sister, simply felt sorry for all that we had to go through together. I told her that I didn't blame her and that I appreciated her apologies. She had, after all, suffered from our parents' poisonous conduct just as much as I had. In a different way, though. Amelia confided in me that she was afraid of what was ahead and unsure of her ability to bounce back. She believes she has failed everyone. Above everything else, though, she fears failing herself. She said that because our parents were so against the notion, she felt locked in her decision to go to treatment. She didn't want to let them down anymore since they had persuaded her that checking herself into a treatment facility would embarrass the family. I was as strong as I could be in telling her that she had to put herself and her healing first. I reiterated to our parents that she cannot conquer her addiction on her own, and that seeking professional assistance is not only essential but also her greatest option for turning her life around. Despite her apparent hesitancy, I could see that my remarks struck a chord with her. I volunteered to assist her in researching treatment alternatives and even offered to help her choose a facility outside of our area where she wouldn't have to worry about criticism or rumor from others if she so desired. I informed her that she should take this action for herself and no one else, and that there was no shame in asking for assistance. Amelia sounded lighter at the end of our talk, as though some of the weight she had been carrying had been relieved by telling me the truth. She vowed to give our conversation careful thought and thanked me for getting in touch. I assured her that I would support her. The third update. Hi there, everyone. I feel so much better now that I've spoken with Amelia. I wish we had been able to get back in touch years ago. In any case, Amelia has consented to eventually check herself into a rehab facility located distant from our house. Not only are my parents upset with her for her choice, but they are also upset that I am now endorsing her. The fact that Amelia and I are now conversing behind their backs is unfathomable to them. My parents have threatened to hold me accountable for forcing Amelia to make this decision if she doesn't get over her drug addiction, even after attending the program. I've made the decision to assist Amelia remotely for the time being. As she heals, I'll keep checking up on her and providing emotional support. I will most certainly go see her again if our connection keeps getting better. After this, I'm going to resume having no communication with my parents. I refuse to be pulled back into their dominion. I hope this will be the wake-up call. I'm not holding my breath, but they must at last take responsibility for their acts. Story 3. Last week, I proposed to my girlfriend, but when I declined, her family gave me a list of expenses the next day. Her father threatened to beat me up, and she branded me selfish. My fiancée Tina and I were engaged until last week, and we intended to tie the knot within the following 6 months. But after I was essentially intimidated and harassed by her family, things took a surprising turn, and I ended our engagement. To give you some background, Tina and I had rather different family histories. My parents are both scholars, and I am the only kid. I had the luxury of concentrating on my studies and personal growth, since I grew up in a secure and encouraging atmosphere. My parents put a lot of effort into providing me with a nice upbringing, while highlighting the significance of morals, self-reliance, and respect for one another. In contrast, Tina is the oldest of 6 siblings and hails from a lower-income household. She faced difficulties throughout her early years that I can't even fathom. The family's stability and finances suffered as a result of her parents' ongoing battles with addiction. Tina's parents expected her and her siblings to support the family as they grew older. Therefore, they placed a large portion of their financial burden on them. Tina was quite honest about her family circumstances. When we first started dating, she described how, because her parents didn't have a steady job, she sends money home to her family each month to help them with their bills. In addition, she provides money to her siblings whenever they are in need, which I soon discovered was frequently. She had to give money if Tina hesitated or refused to comply with her siblings' requests, who would phone her all the time for different things. Her relatives would use guilt trips to get what they want. She was told that she was the oldest. She had to be there for them, because it was her duty to look after them, and because family is family. This was completely unfamiliar area for me. I had never been required to pay for them by my parents. I so frequently urged Tina to think about severing links or establishing strict limits with her family because I come from a home where financial independence and boundaries were the norm. I really think it was bad for her to let her relatives take advantage of her all the time. But Tina always made it plain that I shouldn't get involved because this was her business. She would push back whenever the subject was brought up, and occasionally she would even accuse me of being rude. She would contend that, since I am an only child and had never had to deal with the duties that come with having siblings, I didn't appreciate the value of family responsibilities. She frequently suggested that my viewpoint lacked empathy or kindness. I thus made the decision to take a back seat and honor her preferences after hearing this several times. It was her money, after all, and she had the right to decide how she wanted to spend it. Even though I could see how emotionally and financially she was being drained by her family's continual demands, I didn't want to push her or cause friction in our relationship over this matter. I stopped talking about it altogether. Rather, the first made an effort to be a kind and encouraging companion to her. When Tina and I dated for 2.5 years, I was determined to do all in my power to help her. I always provided for her financially because I wanted to, not because she requested or expected it. I felt that the best way to express my love and gratitude for her was to be a gentleman and provide for her. I always paid for everything without hesitation or complaint, whether it was her hair and nail treatments, our date evenings, or even our trips. I truly wanted her to feel appreciated and cared for. I did it to demonstrate my commitment to her and our relationship. After 2.5 years of dating, I finally asked Tina to marry me this month. I believed that we needed to go forward because our relationship was going so well. When she accepted, I was ecstatic. We felt confident that we were starting one of the happiest phases of our lives, and were excited for what lay ahead. Tina's parents invited us to lunch at their house the very next day. I figured it was their way of formally welcoming me into their family and congratulating us on our engagement. I immediately accepted their invitation out of a desire to be respectful and appreciative. However, as soon as we got there, I saw that this was by no means a festive occasion. Tina's family got right to the point as soon as we sat at the table. They expressed their happiness that I would soon become Tina's husband, but they also made it clear that I would need to prove myself to them in order to be allowed to join their family. I questioned them about the precise meaning of proving my worth. Did my love for Tina and my determination to create a future with her not suffice? Did I really need to go out of my way to try to get their approval too? At this point, her father gave me what he called a to-do list. The list included a number of items that he wanted me to begin paying for in order to demonstrate to him that I was truly prepared to become his son-in-law. The demands included things like buying a new car, remodeling the kitchen, paying off the family's mortgage, and repaying an unpaid school loan. I initially assumed that he and the rest of the family were making fun of me. Perhaps they were playing a practical joke on me. But any idea of laughter was soon dashed by their solemn faces and unflinching tone. I looked to Tina in the hopes that she would clarify things, or at least reassure me that this was all a misunderstanding. To my surprise, however, she avoided making eye contact with me and instead sat quietly, gazing down at her lap. I was caught off guard and abandoned by her eerie and deafening quiet. I took another look at the list, and they weren't little actions or sensible demands. They were vast financial ventures, totally outside the boundaries of what anybody could properly require of a potential son-in-law. I was absolutely taken aback. It was one thing to know that Tina's family relied largely on her for financial assistance. I had long understood that this was part of her life, but to demand that I embrace this duty as a requirement for marrying, Tina was beyond anything I could have imagined. Trying to make sense of the circumstance, I went to Tina and inquired what her family meant by these expectations. Instead of replying, she kept mute, and her father used the chance to speak for her. He said that since Tina was their eldest child, she had always been the major supporter of the family, assisting them financially as much as she could throughout the years. He said that since Tina was the first of their children to marry, it was only reasonable and just that I, as her partner, shoulder at least half of the family's financial load as well. He continued by saying that since I was wealthy, I shouldn't have any trouble complying with their request. Instead of discussing important financial issues like paying off their home loans or other large bills, his informal tone gave the impression that he was discussing something as unimportant as borrowing a cup of sugar. I questioned him directly whether he had gone insane, mocking his snobbish claim to my money. Without holding back, I made it clear to him that I would not be covering any of their bills or obligations. I was marrying Tina, yes, but I wasn't marrying them. I had no intention of taking on financial obligations for individuals I hardly knew or cared for. How they even believed this was a reasonable requirement was beyond me. Desperate for her approval or at least an explanation, I appealed to Tina once again. I questioned her about why she was remaining mute in the face of her family's irrational demands, particularly when they concerned my finances and our future. At last, she said something. However, her remarks simply made matters worse. Tina informed me that she didn't believe the expectations made by her family were unjustified. She said that the goal of marriage was for me, as her man, to assume at least part of her obligations, to divide up duties. Her response caught me completely off guard, and her comments were like a kick to the belly. I had never heard her talk about this before. One of Tina's sisters spoke out and supported her before I could counter her. She emphasized how unjust it was that Tina and I led such a comfortable life. The other siblings, however, lived in poverty and had trouble paying their expenses. He added his viewpoint with a smug certainty, and his brother jumped in as well. He said it was my turn to become Tina's spouse and support them since she had been giving them money each month without question. No inquiries were made. Only a true man would have no trouble doing this, he said. I genuinely thought I was going crazy at this point. I made Tina's brother aware of the irony. He was also a dude. Why, therefore, would he expect me to handle their family's money rather than taking on the role himself? This seems to annoy her brother. After that, I turned to face Tina and asked her directly whether this had always been her goal. After we were married, did she truly intend to let me look after her family? Did she think I would settle their debts and bills? Because I would have immediately made it apparent that I would not have agreed if she had brought it up earlier in our relationship. I pressed harder, frustrated, and inquired as to why she had never brought this up to me before. This whole thing seemed dishonest and deceptive to me. She had obviously had this plan for me with her family the whole time we were dating, but she had never mentioned it. This is exactly how gold diggers work, I informed her simply. They keep their partners in the dark until it's too late and take advantage of them for financial benefit. The room burst into turmoil as soon as I said the phrase gold digger. He and his parents started shouting at me, saying I was disrespecting her and going too far. Her father reiterated that it was completely usual and not a huge thing to ask their future son-in-law for money. Her mother added that if I wanted to marry Tina, I had to start behaving like a member of the family since this was a family duty. Despite her obvious embarrassment, Tina maintained that this was what any woman would anticipate from her spouse. She intensified her accusation that I was being self-centered, pointing out that being an only child, I have no idea what it's like to have a big family. She also made a guarantee that her family wouldn't ask me for anything else in the future and attempted to comfort me that all I needed to do was do everything on the to-do list. However, as I glanced around the room at her family's expressions, all I saw were the avaricious, cunning features of individuals who were well aware of their actions. I felt like a total idiot for not recognizing that they were jackals sooner. I had trusted Tina for years and disregarded the warning signs because I believed I would never be impacted. However, this lunch had clarified everything. The last nail in the coffin was what she said. As much as I had cared for Tina, I just couldn't ignore the sense of entitlement they displayed. I realized then that I would never be able to wed someone who saw my financial security as a resource that needed to be depleted for her family's benefit. I shook my head, experiencing a mixture of lucidity and incredulity. Then I turned to Tina and told her that she was right to call me selfish if she wanted to, since I didn't want to empty my bank account. I was too self-centered to allow them to persuade me to serve as their lifelong meal ticket. Her support for their demands only served to confirm to me that she had always had this malicious goal and had likely been keeping her actual identity hidden from me the entire time. I directly questioned her if she truly believed that I was a simpleton she could marry and use to force her to shoulder her family's responsibilities. Tina's face became scarlet when she heard this, and she started to stutter, rejecting what I had stated. She argued that while she and her family had little, I had substantial money and came from a secure financial background. Tina contended that she and her family's request for financial assistance from me wasn't really that unjust. I should be able to assist them without hesitation because I have more than enough. I tried to gather myself at this time by closing my eyes and taking a big breath. I had always taken pleasure in my intelligence and discernment, but now I understood how deeply this lady I had previously believed to know had affected me. It was an eye-opening insight. This was no longer about relationship or affection. This concerned how much she and her family could take from me and what I could offer. I tell Tina that I will no longer dispute with her as I open my eyes and stare right into her eyes. She obviously expected me to take over and support her family, but I was unable to do so. Moreover, she needed a man who would. She had no reason to remain together any longer. I made it obvious that our engagement was formally over and that we were done. When I informed Tina that she needed to find someone else who would be prepared to be her family's scapegoat or, better still, their golden goose, she gave me a horrified expression. I then requested the return of the engagement ring. I wanted to please Tina, so I gave in to her request and got her a big diamond ring. But I didn't see why she should retain it if there wasn't going to be a wedding. At this point, Tina and her family started fighting with me right away. Her sisters started yelling at me, saying I had broken my vow to marry her. Tina, who was now crying, insisted that I give it some time to consider things out, claiming that ending our relationship was a hasty and unnecessarily harsh move on my part. She promised that we could still resolve the issue if I would just relax and understand that her family's wishes weren't out of the ordinary. Conversely, her father started to act more aggressively. After his daughter had devoted 2 crucial years of her life to me, he fiercely proclaimed that I had no right to break her heart. He ignored the reality that their actions were the cause of the issue and pretended that I was a monster for leaving. He even implied that I had no option but to honor my promise and wed Tina because of everything she had given up for us. If not, he would beat me up with his boys. I remained firm in the face of threats, yelling, and entreaties. After learning what I had just learned, I told them that I didn't care what they threatened to do to me, because nothing in the world would force me to wed Tina. No amount of intimidation or guilt-tripping could change my decision. I had already made it. I told them that I would call the police and sue them for every penny I had, if they even touched the hair on my head. That effectively closed Tina's data. Tina, meanwhile, would not return the ring to me and kept crying. I walked away without saying anything more, because I didn't want to argue with her anymore. I was mentally, emotionally, and even physically exhausted. I could no longer stand being around Tina and her family. The fallout from our split has been difficult ever since. There are many friends that Tina and I share, and everyone's views have been extremely different. Most of them appear to be on my side. They have publicly called Tina a gold digger and concur that her actions were dishonest and opportunistic. They agreed that I had every right to leave her since they think she purposefully concealed her family's expectations for me until I was totally committed to the engagement. But other women, mostly a small percentage, feel differently. They have stated that, in their view, I ought to have at least thought about providing Tina's family with some minor financial support. They contend that, particularly when one couple is from a less affluent background, helping your partner's family is merely a requirement of being in a partnership. They think I could have attempted to find a solution, even if it didn't mean giving in to all of her family's ridiculous expectations, and that I was too fast to reject the notion completely. So I am on Reddit to know if I really did a bad thing by breaking up with Tina. Aita update 1. Hello guys. I have just found out that Tina has been going around telling people that I'm not a man enough because I refused to take up any of her family's burdens and left her like a coward. She's even gone as far as to imply that any woman who marries me in the future is bound to have a bad existence, since, according to her, I'm selfish and only think about myself. These claims are not only incorrect, but extremely unjust, considering how much I gave to our relationship and how I treated her with love and respect, up until the moment her family crossed the boundary. For those who are questioning how I could have been with someone like Tina without recognizing her true character, believe me, I had no idea. Do you really believe I would have spent almost 2 years of my life with a lady who wanted me to pay, not just her lifestyle, but also her family's? Absolutely not. I would have terminated things right away if I had noticed any indications of this conduct sooner. The fact is that Tina was the one who initially pursued me. On our first date, she was the one who came up to me, asked me out, and always appeared utterly enthralled with me. She always presented herself as a self-sufficient woman who was only burdened by her family. I gave her whatever she wanted without question, stayed with her, and invested in her because of this. For 2.5 years, there was no reason for me to question her motives, so I never did. But everything changed in a single night. She sided with her family when they made their ludicrous requests. Her actual hues emerged at that point, and I was able to glimpse a previously hidden aspect of her: the lack of boundaries, the entitlement, and the readiness to defend their actions as appropriate. It wasn't until then that I saw how fundamentally our goals and ideals diverged from others who think I ought to have handled things differently and stayed with her. All I can say is this: I am aware of my value and the contributions I can make to a partnership. I'm not self-centered. I'm a giving and affectionate spouse. However, there is a thin line separating being helpful from being taken advantage of. Building a life together is the goal of marriage, not one person depleting the other emotionally or financially. When Tina and her family exceeded that boundary, I did what any respectable person would do and left. I wholeheartedly concur with a number of commenters who have emphasized how fortunate I am to have learned Tina and her family's genuine motivations prior to our marriage. If all of this had surfaced after we were married, I can't even begin to comprehend how much worse things would have been. In retrospect, I believe that they believed they could make these demands of me and expect me to comply because, up until now, I've always been the type of person who has stood by Tina no matter what. In addition, I tend to be a quiet person who stays out of arguments. For example, every time I went to a restaurant to have lunch with Tina's family, when it was Tina's birthday, I always took the tab. To make her day extra memorable, I went all out and paid for everything. Even when Tina and her siblings went out to eat, see a movie, or do anything else, Elle would always purchase their tickets, cover other costs, and pay for their taxi trip. I loved Tina so much that I did those things. I believed I was helping the people she cared about, but looking back, I can understand how they could have seen my generosity as a vulnerability that could be taken advantage of. I must have seemed to be a bottomless ATM from whom they could gradually begin to withdraw an increasing amount of money without inquiry. They probably thought that since we were now legally engaged and getting married, I would inevitably comply with their financial demands as a member of their family. Naturally, they were surprised when I stood up for myself and refused. Their violent responses to my rejection, Tina's father's threats, her siblings ranting, and even Tina's attempts to place the blame on me just served to show how determined they were to coerce me into complying with their demands. They lashed out the way they did because they never thought I would resist or see through their actions. Even while the entire experience has been challenging, it has also served as a significant wake-up call for me. I will never allow someone to exploit me in this manner again. In the future, never again. Fortunately, Tina and I never shared a home. We intended to move in together shortly after the engagement, and she shares an apartment with a few roommates. Naturally, everything that transpired with her family has now totally ruined all of those plans. Everything she had left behind, including clothing, personal belongings, and little goods, has been packed up in my flat. And since I don't want to see her ever again, I'm going to return them back to her. Update 2. Many people have been urging me to contact Tina and request that she return the engagement ring, stating that it belongs to me and that I should take steps to get it back. To be honest, though, I didn't want to deal with her or her drama anymore. If she will leave me alone, I reasoned, let her keep it. I decided it wasn't worth going through all of that turmoil just to get a piece of jewelry back, because it was one less item I had to deal with anyhow. But tonight, my ex arrived at my house intoxicated and shouting at me. She kept beating on my door, insisting that I open it so we could speak. I wasn't going to do that, of course. After all that had transpired, I was not going to let her entry. Since I had a Ring camera, I thought I would ask her why she was there and why she was disturbing my neighbors by creating a scene outside my house. Tina shouted at me that she wanted to reunite with me and that she missed me terribly. She said that once she had decided to marry me, I had no right to just walk away. She maintained that I should have just complied with their requests and that I had humiliated her and her family over something as trivial as money. Tina even went so far as to tell me that although money will come and go, our love for one another seemed to be the most important thing. But I could hear how manipulative she sounded, how she was attempting to defend everything and make me feel bad about something that, in her opinion, wasn't really important. In my opinion, she had fallen so far that it was impossible to see how her own feeling of entitlement had caused her to become so oblivious. I no longer felt the love, affection, or trust I previously did. Disgust and sympathy for her were all that remained. As quietly as possible, I informed Tina that I had made it quite apparent that we were finished. Out of love and civility, I had devoted a great deal of time and energy to helping her and her family, but I never agreed to be their cash cow for the rest of my life. I had always been tolerant and patient with her family, but I couldn't keep this up any longer. Time said that I should educate myself on how these things functioned, since this was the way all marriages operated. I responded angrily, telling her that I was sick of her generalizations and her assumption that such conduct was normal. Her expectation that her boyfriend would provide for her entire family financially was unreasonable. So far, I had been truly sorry for her, I told her. Throughout our relationship, I always paid for her belongings because I recognized the burden she was under to provide for her family. Nevertheless, I now see that she was using me for financial gain, just like them. She most likely waited for me to ask her to marry me, so she could make me take her place. Tina appeared irritated when she heard this, but I could tell that my comments were striking her in the face. She continued to argue with me, but I had had enough. I warned her that she had to leave my property right now, or I will contact the police. Tina then started pleading with me to at least unblock her on my phone, but I turned her down. I informed her that I would never again want to speak with her. I could no longer stand her games or manipulation. She kicked and swore at me through the door before storming out. 3 months have passed since my previous update. After much thought, I finally left my previous residence. I'm currently living with my parents as I look for a new place to call home. I didn't have much of a choice, but it wasn't an easy one. As you can see, Tina and her family have been harassing me for a long time, which has made living in my previous residence intolerable. For my own mental health, I had to go. I've also had to cut ties with certain friends who continue to support Tina throughout the last few months. Although they have been begging me to give her another opportunity, it is obvious that they are unaware of the seriousness of what she and her family attempted to do to me. I've been forced to change both my email address and phone number. Tina began contacting me from different numbers in an attempt to get in touch, and I was unable to handle the ongoing stress. My dad and I have discussed the situation, and we now intend to obtain a restraining order shortly. I do not want Tina to ever return, either at my new residence or even at my parents' house, intoxicated and shouting at me. At first, I assumed she was simply struggling to come to terms with our split, but I can no longer put up with that type of conduct. I have to defend myself, even if it's unfortunate that things have reached this point.